Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hunter, energy healer in the United States. Welcome to the Life Made Easier podcast, where you'll find ancient wisdom with a modern approach. In each episode, we're going to share useful information from the world of energy healing. We've helped you develop and enhance your energy intelligence to make your life easier in simple and practical ways.
And I'm Dr. Karen James, a psychologist and energy healer in the UK. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about one of our very favourite topics, and that's Reiki. We're going to cover what Reiki is, how it works, the common misconceptions, and why you might want to consider taking a class to learn this healing technique for yourself.
So let's start from the beginning. What is Reiki? Reiki can be understood in a bunch of ways, but at its heart, Reiki is a self-care practice. It's something that we learn to do for ourselves that makes our life better. And many people have heard me say many, many times that it's kind of the brushing your teeth for the energy health world. And the reason that I say that and why Karen and I say it that way is because it is a self-care practice that you do for yourself the way that brushing your teeth is. You'll never know what it is you've saved yourself from doing it. There's still lots of value for seeing a professional to have your teeth professionally cleaned or to go into a Reiki practitioner. And there's a limitation to what it can do for you, but it is also incredibly valuable. And without it, it's much more difficult to keep our energy health strong. So primarily, what is Reiki? It is a self-care practice that we learn to do for ourselves, that we also see professionals that help us along with our healthcare, our energy health. So it's a healing system. It's a self-care practice, but we can also talk about Reiki specifically as a vibration. And the vibration that we're using during that self-care practice, during that treatment that we're receiving, is also called Reiki. So it's a frequency of Reiki, it's a system of Reiki, it's a practice of Reiki. It is many things. It is many things, and it is most importantly wonderful. It's one of our favorite things to teach and talk about and do with people.
Yeah, I want just maybe it's helpful just to kind of reiterate what Tiffany just said, because I think it's a subtle difference, but one that people can struggle with a little bit sometimes. So essentially, for our purposes today, I think two of the things to really take away from about Reiki in terms of what is it is a vibration of energy. So what comes out of a practitioner's hands that we're then making available to either our own body, the self-care practice part, or somebody else's body, that's a vibration of energy, which we call Reiki. And there are many vibrations of energy, different types of energy. Reiki is just one. But we also use the same name of Reiki for that healing practice. And I guess a fundamental difference between them, which I always think is so important when I'm teaching people about Reiki, is that the vibration of energy itself that we call Reiki is just exists in the world. It's like water exists on our planet, oxygen exists on our planet, gravity exists on our planet. Those things were kind of identified, talked about, described, defined by humans, but they weren't created by humans. And we can have some impact on them. We can freeze water or, whatever. But essentially, in their pure form, they just exist on the planet. So Reiki is a vibration of energy which exists on our planet. I have no idea if it exists on other planets. I will let you know should I ever find out. Um, but the Reiki, the practice of Reiki, and that by that we mean all the things like, where do I put my hands? What do I do with my hands? What do I have to do to learn it? How do I get it to come out my hands? How do I explain it to people? All that kind of stuff around how you use that vibration of energy. That we can think of that as a system of healing that was created by humans using this particular vibration. And that's partly helpful to understand because I think it really helps us see how come people talk about Reiki in different ways and maybe teach it in slightly different ways, because inevitably as humans we often like to put our own stamp on things, or we have slightly different interpretations or understandings or experiences of things. So we, different people over the course of the history of Reiki as a healing system as we know it kind of today, different people have all talked about it, described it, taught it, whatever, in slightly different ways.
Yeah, we really can't say enough about the distinction between those two things. It reminds me a little of um, the sun and the religion of Apollo, right? So the sun exists on the planet. Our belief in it, our disbelief in it, how we want to understand it, what we say about it, how we relate to it, doesn't really change sunlight at all. Um, in the same way that how we teach, what we believe, how we interact with Reiki, believing in Reiki, not believing in Reiki, does not change the vibration of Reiki that just simply exists on the planet. But the system of Reiki very much is dependent upon how people conceptualize energy, how people conceptualize the world around them. And that's where you start to get more human-oriented ideas. None of them affect the frequency of Reiki, but they will deeply affect the people that are learning and practicing. This is something that is important to us so much because uh, Karen and I are very much committed to teaching Reiki as an energy medicine, as a healthcare practice, as a self-care practice, and that's not how it's usually thought of.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about it as a spiritual practice. That's probably the most common. And the other
Mm-hmm.
one, sometimes it's taught almost more as a meditation type practice, or certainly that
Mm-hmm.
meditation is important for its use, which, you know, I mean, you can add in some meditation, but that's not really, that's like an addition to the practice rather than what Reiki is or what you have to do in order to use it. Some healing methods do require more of a meditative type state. Reiki doesn't. And one of the most fantastic things I think about Reiki is that, which means that you can, because you don't need to be in any particular state or state of mind, you can do it anywhere. My most favorite
Mm-hmm.
example is standing in the queue at the supermarket. What you could just put a hand on your body and do a bit of Reiki on yourself, and you know, no one else would know that that's what you're doing. And you know, okay, you're not going to get the same level of lovely deep relaxation and connection that you would if you're sitting doing that quietly by yourself, but it will still bring some of the benefits. Which brings us neatly on to what is it? What is the you know, how does Reiki work? What does it do for, or perhaps what does it do for us is a more accurate question, because I think in truth there are still things that we honestly don't 100%, you know, can't 100% explain exactly how it works, but we can explain what it does for us, how it helps us, what benefits it has for us. And really it helps us in three main ways. So, and I'm going to quickly list them, and then we can pick them apart a little bit more and explain a bit more about them. And it works importantly as well. It works primarily on two parts of us. So it works on our physical body and it works on our aura. And just to give you a very, very simple explanation, the aura is, we can think of our auras as being a bit like serving the same function for our energy system that our skin serves for our physical body. So our skin is the outer edge of our physical body. It performs, you know, if it's healthy and well, it forms a really good, effective barrier, keeping stuff in, all the squishy bits of us inside our physical body, and keeping out anything that we don't want. But it's not 100% solid, so it's kind of semi permeable. So it, you know, we can sweat out through our skin. We can absorb some medications, or some, you know, something like magnesium is absorbed through the skin really well. So our skin is a kind of work is a really good functioning thing that lets some things in and out, and generally, hopefully, not anything we don't want to go in or out. And our aura is very much like that for our physical body. So, for our energy body. So it provides a protective outer layer to all that is us, which includes our energy system. And so Reiki works on those two parts of us. So it doesn't really, it kind of has a knock-on effect on our emotions and our mind, but it doesn't really work directly on those parts of us.
Yeah, and here is where I think it becomes important to understand how we conceptualize Reiki versus perhaps how other people's might. Because if you were to Google Reiki, most of what you're going to see in terms of what is it, the definition is going to be Reiki is a universal life energy, a Japanese universal life energy that works on all levels of a person, on all levels of healing, right? That's pretty much what it is, right? Reiki is a Japanese system of healing that works on all levels of healing, universal energy. If you were to ask us what Reiki is, as Karen just put forward, we would say that it's a vibration that exists on the planet that repairs wear and tear to the human body and aura. And Reiki actually is not impressed with either of those definitions. Reiki doesn't care. Reiki is still out there doing what it's doing. But the system of Reiki that we're teaching, this is how we think of Reiki, but this is what it's doing. It's repair, it's offering wear and tear to the physical body and the aura, as Karen just outlined. And there are some pretty fundamental, important things that are involved in that. One of them is that it's repairing wear and tear. And if you're repairing wear and tear, you're not getting into trauma. You're not getting into more acute states. And when I hear people talk about the universal working on all levels, works on all things of Reiki, I feel dissatisfied because I see so many people coming into the office that feel that it's their fault that their Reiki has failed because it hasn't fixed for them what they were promised to be fixed, or they don't understand what they're doing wrong. And I think there's a naivety to the idea that anything, anywhere, nothing in our world fixes everything. Why would Reiki be an exception to that? It's important to understand what something does, and it's important to understand the limitations of that. And also, understanding that Reiki fixes wear and tear in the body and the aura allows Reiki to be a diagnostic tool. And so much, we talk about a lot in this podcast about energy intelligence. So much of increasing our energy intelligence is understanding when when self-care home remedies will work and when they won't. And so if people have been consistently using their Reiki and it's not fixing the symptom, then, well, now it's probably not due to wear and tear, and you might need more expertise.
Yeah, I think that's really important, but I also want to back up and just make sure we're clear about what we mean by wear and tear, because I think that may
Good.
be something which is a term that might feel a bit in this context kind of vague to people. And wear and tear, we have experience of this with all kinds of things. I mean, with our own bodies, if you're over a certain age, you may have joints that are beginning to experience wear and tear. You will certainly have possessions that are starting to look a bit scruffy around the edges, or, and even if those things haven't ever been mistreated in any way, they will over time wear as a result of just existing in the world. And a good example of this, I think, is if you have a car. So we all know over time our cars begin to wear out, and the more we take care of them, the more we service them regularly, we have to do things like changing tires, that kind of stuff. We hopefully will both prolong their life, but also mean that they function better for the amount of time we have them, the better care we take of them. And still, however excellent our care of them is, they will still, start to show signs of wear and tear after a certain amount of time. And some cars will show that quicker than others. And even if you have a car that you never drive, you keep in a perfectly climate controlled garage. I was going to say there, that's the, I'm talking to the American, um, in a perfectly climate controlled environment that's ideal for metal and whatever, even if you never drive that car, given enough time, it will it will start to show signs of wear and tear. It eventually will rust. Parts of it might seize up because it hasn't been used. So we know from our experience of having things, but also our own physical bodies probably, that the use of them has an impact on them. And for our energy system, we can think of this wear and tear as being a result. Tiffany kind of touched on how Reiki doesn't directly really help us with trauma. To take one example, Reiki is really good at helping us with the stuff that occurs as a result of this kind of wear and tear. And we can say, well, what is that wear and tear? Well, in the world around us, there are things which energies in the world which aren't, meaning us any harm, but have an impact on our aura, on our bodies, on our beings. Just like the weather has an impact on us. The rain isn't out to get you and make you wet when you leave your house. But it if you can put an umbrella up, you can put waterproof clothing on, but you can't avoid the impact that rain is going to have on you. So what we're talking about with what Reiki is really great at helping us with is really that day-to-day stuff that just exists in the environment. That isn't about how good is your diet, how much exercise are you doing, even how clean is the air you're breathing, which most of us have no control over really. It's about that day-to-day kind of impact on our bodies, on our auras, on our energy systems. So Reiki, those three things which I think I distracted myself away from, that Reiki is really good at helping us with. The first one is repair to this wear and tear. The second is Reiki is really good at helping us naturally relax. And Reiki also helps us to be more balanced in the ways that the wear and tear can make us be unbalanced. So, you can still do all sorts of things that will make you unbalanced in other ways. And I think we have another podcast episode on being balanced and all that means.
Mm-hmm.
But Reiki, there are ways that we will then get out of balance as a result of that wear and tear, the energies in the world around us impacting us. And Reiki is our number one support, help, cure, fix it for that. And as Tiffany said, that doesn't mean it then can cure anything, or that we should expect it to.
Yeah, I think we both argue though that it will help everything feel better.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the case of trauma, which I think is the most obvious and extreme example, it's not going to. So just to define trauma, for us, we define trauma as anything that is being stored, any energetic charge from the past that's being stored in the body now and having a negative impact on the person, right? And so the way you release trauma is by releasing that energy out of the system, and then that charge can no longer affect you. Well, Reiki will not release that traumatic charge from the body, but what it will do is it will repair the exhaustion that somebody feels by trying not to be impacted by that charge, by trying to function on top of it, by trying to push through or white knuckle it. All of those things are exhausting. And that exhaustion is wear and tear. So by being able to fix that with Reiki, everything about having that traumatic experience still trapped in the body is easier. And so the person will absolutely feel better. For us as healers and for us as people who want to increase people's energy intelligence so that they understand how to take care of their energy health better, that's an important distinction, to understand the difference between really releasing the trauma and just managing it more effectively. You'll certainly feel better, but it's important to understand the mechanics of why that's happening and to look under the hood a little bit to have a better understanding.
Yeah, you make me think that the way that Reiki helps us to feel more relaxed and more balanced also is part of what can be so beneficial about Reiki, with supporting us with other things that the Reiki itself might not be able to fix, like trauma, as you were talking about. But being able to have something either that you can do for yourself or a healer or therapist can do for you that will help you really naturally relax, help you feel a bit more balanced, kind of greases the wheels, if you like, of that work on the trauma. So if you're trying to connect with some quite difficult emotions, if you're trying to allow that stored energy, as you described, to come up and release, the more you can feel relaxed and supported, and you're not having to deal with that kind of white noise of the wear and tear, then I think it makes that a bit easier. So, and I wonder if that's where some of the misconception that Reiki can do everything comes from, because it often does make other things that it doesn't do directly a bit easier. And I think the
Yeah,
same is true for physical health, because we know that if people are ill, if they're in pain, if they're having to have some, horrible treatments as a result of an illness, Reiki tends to just ease it a little bit. It might not take it away, but it eases it. And in fact, there is some research that suggests that people who are undergoing things like chemotherapy, which, is such a toxic treatment for our bodies and very stressful for our minds and emotionally, and people who have the research suggests that people who have regular Reiki tend to have less side effects and just cope with going through a process like that better. So, Reiki isn't, we're not saying, oh, Reiki might cure your cancer, don't go and have other treatments, but absolutely have some Reiki alongside if that's something you're having to deal with.
yeah, absolutely. Reiki is actually the most well researched, second best well researched. That's a terrible sentence, but you know what I mean. Second best well researched energy medicine technique next to acupuncture.
Mm.
Acupuncture being the highest. I think people, in fact, acupuncture is so well validated and researched that people often forget that it's an energy medicine technique, as if
Mm.
somehow there's medicine or something in the needles. But next to that is Reiki, and I think the reason for that is because it's been proven. Well, I think first and foremost because so many nurses are know how to do Reiki, and they're in hospitals and they've had access to good research teams. But I think it's been shown that to be helpful during things like chemotherapy over and over and over again. And so it's being offered everywhere, at the Mayo, everywhere. I,
And
I wanted to mention.
people are also using it in projects working with people with quite serious mental illness as well, like psychosis and stuff like that. And again, it's not that it's gonna mean that you don't need other support or help or treatment for those kind of challenges, but it can be a very beneficial kind of adjunct to. I think it's great for the, like, I'm basically doing okay and I just want to look after myself well, but also really, really supportive when we're dealing with something in life, physically, mentally, emotionally, just externally, what's happening in our life to support us to get through those things.
Yeah, and as you say, working on ourselves to take care of ourselves and prevent further troubles. God, you've said such interesting things, Karen. I've got two things in my head that I wanted to make sure to get out. So one of them was just to go back to what you were saying about how just because Reiki doesn't work directly on something doesn't mean it's not going to help it, and come back to that idea of the mind,
Mm.
because Reiki doesn't work directly on the mind, right? It works directly on the body and the aura. But one of the primary responses, excuse me, one of the primary responses to receiving Reiki is that the mind shuts down and the chitty chatty monkey stops. And I think again that's why people sometimes make that mistake. And it's not that the mind has been affected directly; it's that it's been affected indirectly. And I wanted to break that down again in the interest of giving people information about how their energy health works, because I loved the word that you used, white noise,
Mm.
right? So, as we're walking through the world in our little aura bubble, bumping up against the rest of the world energetically, just like our skin bumps up to the rest of the world physically, we're kind of walking energetically through a sandstorm, right? Other people's emotions, the stuff that's in the air, everything around us, and all of that impacts our aura, and some of that the aura gets impacted and the body pockmarked, stretched, pushed in on, dirtied, all the things, right? And all of that shows up, debris that now is sitting in the energy fields, and all of that shows up as white noise. And so when Reiki comes and repairs all of that and cleans all of that out, there's this inevitable feeling of, right? And the mind relax, right? But again, it's not relaxing because it's working, because the mind has been shifted. We need other healing techniques for that. It's relaxed because it's not having to work through all of this cacophony that was sitting in our energy. And that's an important, I mean, look, for some people, all they want to know is that they're going to feel better. But some people want, that's just like, how do you do Reiki? Please teach it to me. I want to feel better. But some people, particularly I imagine those listening to this podcast, want in earnest to understand how their energy anatomy works and why these things are working. And so that's the breakdown for Reiki.
I wonder if it's helpful just to say something briefly here about the kinds of ways that people find Reiki does make them feel better. Because I think that for the people who are less interested in the more in-depth discussion about how it works and all the rest of it, how is this going to help me? And I think, I mean, you may have some different things, Tiffany, but certainly from my own experience and my students' experiences, things like I sleep better. I cope with like the annoyances of life more easily. So people who have kids or who have annoying bosses or have busy, hectic jobs with hundreds of staff they're managing, their ability to cope with the stress and anxiety and frustrations and of those things tend to improve. People will often say they just feel calmer, they have a bit more energy, they feel more themselves. I don't know, I'm trying to think what other ones can you think of, Tiffany?
I can tell you, but just in that vein, when I teach a beginner Reiki class, I'll often have advanced students in the class as mentors, and I'll ask them the question, how do you know when you're Reiki deprived and you haven't been doing enough Reiki? And we share it, and what's your tell? And I can tell you my tell is everybody else in the world gets more irritating.
Yeah.
When I haven't done enough Reiki on myself, like when I haven't drunk enough water, I might get a mild headache. When I haven't done enough Reiki on myself, y'all get really annoying.
Yeah, yeah. And I also notice more tension in my body, bit more physical tension. Like it's
Yeah.
harder on that purely physical level to relax. I think it's interesting because often our new students go away and we always give them the instruction to start with particularly do Reiki on yourself every day give yourself a bit of a chance to really get to start to know how does this impact me? Because the better a sense we have of the value of Reiki to us, the more likely we are to keep using it. That's true of everything. And, if someone says to you, you should drink more water, and you drink a bit more water, and then you're like, I don't really feel any different, the chances are you're not going to bother to keep drinking more water. But if you start drinking more water and go, oh, I feel less sleepy in the afternoon, I have a bit more energy, my skin has started improving, then you think, oh, there's a point in drinking more water. So we want to encourage our students to really set themselves up to notice, to be able to see what is the benefit of doing this? Why should I bother to make the time to do this every day? And often students say to me that, there are things they will notice. And then when perhaps they've had a particularly busy week, maybe they've forgotten to do it for a number of days, and then things will start to happen exactly as you described, Tiffany. Isaac, like the world gets more annoying, or suddenly I'm not sleeping so well again, or I'm feeling just really lethargic, or I'm finding I'm worrying more about stuff, or I've got more physical tension in my body. And then they might have a moment where they go, oh, I haven't been doing much Reiki lately. And the beauty of it comes out your own hands. You can just put your hands on your own body and start again. And Reiki doesn't say, you're a bad person for forgetting about me for the last week or month or however long it's been. It's like, when you realize you haven't drunk enough water today, you turn on the tap and fill your glass and drink more water. And the tap doesn't go, I'm not giving you water today because you're a bad person because you didn't drink water yesterday. It just makes available water to you if you're fortunate enough to live in a country where you have clean drinking water. Yeah, so I think we can, and that often gives us a really good lesson in, oh yeah, that, or a reminder, perhaps I should say, of yeah, that really is why I'm bothering to do this, why this practice is valuable to me.
Yeah, what you say is so important. I think that we've both had the experience of meeting so many people that have done a Reiki class, and you'll ask them about it and they'll say, "Yeah, yeah, I did it 20 years ago and it was really magical and I loved it." And then you ask them if they've used it at all. They're like, "Yeah, no, they had this magical experience in the moment, but they
Mm.
didn't turn it into a daily practice." And I think some of that comes about because Reiki is magic. And especially the first time that you learn to do it and you put your hands on yourself and magic comes out of your hands and you can feel it moving through your body. And you and I have been teaching this for collectively half a century, right? Almost between the two of us,
Probably.
right? And we've never met a person that didn't learn it, that couldn't learn it.
Mm.
And so even somebody who just couldn't imagine to watch this magical thing happen for them, it is magic and it is lovely. But the flip side to that is to developing a daily practice, because just like drinking water, doing Reiki and drinking water today a lot doesn't mean you don't need it tomorrow, right? It's the kind of thing, because it is daily wear and tear, it does have to be done every day. And I think we all can remember, especially those of us that are parents and have had to do this for a small child, how long it took for us to be trained to brush our teeth every day, right? To take care of ourselves every day. It does not come naturally, ironically, for a species that requires so much self-care. And so if we put the emphasis on the magic feeling coming out of our hands, it that novelty wears off really fast. But if you can support students to really understand and to not just feel the magic in their hands, but to feel the relaxation, to notice that everybody around them is less annoying. All of a sudden, they've all got taken lessons in how to be more how to be more amazing. Um, that they're less tired. That I think the big thing that we hear from people the most is, I just was more resilient to the stress in my life. It's not that the stress went down, but I am more resilient to it. When you put the emphasis on that side of the equation, that novelty never gets old. And then people can really settle down to have a daily practice.
The other thing I want to say, from what you've just talked about, and I really want to say this to speak to anybody listening who falls into that category that Tiffany described, of people who had a Reiki attunement last year, 10 years ago, whenever, and don't use it. And not everybody feels the magic come out of their hands in a really concrete way. And that again can mean, well, people can doubt, well, am I really using it? Did it work for me? Am I any good at it? All of those kind of things. We're often very quick to doubt ourselves. Maybe my teacher wasn't any good. Maybe Reiki doesn't exist after all. All of those things, reasons we might explain. Whereas if we've really been helped to understand what benefit is it having, when Tiffany says she's never met anybody who couldn't learn it, and the same is true for me, that is absolutely true. But not everybody feels a lot of sensation in their hands, particularly to start with. But
Mhm.
everybody starts with a little bit of use, starts to feel changes in their body, starts to notice things that happen to them or how they experience the world, that when they stop doing Reiki go away again. And that really is the value. So if you're somebody who's like, well, yeah, I did a Reiki class and then I didn't really feel very much, so that's why I didn't bother doing it, continuing doing it, then again, I'd really encourage you to. It doesn't go away if you want to go take another class, but to help with your confidence, great, do that. But equally, you could just cup your hands like you're scooping water, put them on your body, and just, decide you're going to do that for 5 or 10 minutes every day for a week. And,
And just see how
and
you feel.
yeah,
Yeah,
see how you
see the
feel. And
difference.
if you're really of a scientific mind, then stop doing it for another week. Then start again and, test it until your mind can go, oh, yes, I'm noticing a difference. This is actually providing some really solid benefit for me. And it
Hmm.
might be a slightly different benefit. Not everybody has all the same benefits. I think sleeping's a good example of this. Like some people will do a Reiki attunement, maybe they've been having insomnia for a long time, and will almost immediately it will be like a magic cure. For other people, maybe it doesn't really help that much, but at least gives them something to do when they're lying awake at night. And the reason for that is probably the first person's sleeping problems were caused because of that wear and tear we were talking about. As Tiffany said, it can, in that sense, it can kind of be used as a bit of a diagnostic thing. So if your sleeping problems seem to get magically, miraculously cured by Reiki, great, they were caused by wear and tear. Not everybody's sleeping problems are caused by that. There's many reasons we might have trouble sleeping. Reiki is likely to help. It may not completely fix it. And, if it doesn't start to improve in a week or two of regular, consistent practice, that's the point at which you go, okay, maybe I need to look into something else to help me with this.
Yeah, it's a classic example of why it's so important to understand the limitations of Reiki and how it works, as that diagnostic tool, and that it's not a failure of Reiki and it's not a failure of you if that's your experience. I want to pick up on what you said about the cupped hand,
Mm.
um, because I actually did my Reiki training in the UK. And I think in the UK it's much more common than I've seen having moved back to America. It doesn't happen that often here. It does, but not as consistently it does in the UK, which is the need for the hand to be cupped in order for Reiki to flow well. It will flow out of a hand that's not cupped, but not nearly as efficiently. And so put your hand, if this is you and you want to, as Karen said, pick your Reiki back up again. Put your hand in a position, hold your hand in a position as if you were holding water. And if water is going to fall out of it, move the hand position and your finger position to as if you were going to cup that water, and then see how that goes. Another way of doing that is putting it on your forehead or putting it just right on your shoulder. And that nice, gentle, rounded position is the perfect Reiki position. And then put it anywhere facing you, either touching you or not touching you, both handed or one handed, makes no difference whatsoever.
I know some people are listening to this on audio, but in case you are listening on video, I am demonstrating. But yeah, you can do Reiki with your hands physically resting on your body or a little bit away. The chin is also good because our chins are kind of, if you cup your hand round your chin is, it kind of, it's a kind of scoopy water shape.
Yeah,
Um,
for me it's the forehead, because for those of you that have checked us out on video, you'll see I have the world's largest forehead ever. So just put it right on my forehead and I'm all there. Something else to think about, is things to think about if you're going to do it, if you're going to pick it back up again, is you don't need to have any special skills to do it. You don't need any special kind of like rubbing your hands together beforehand or to say a prayer. Now, you might want to do those things because it helps you get into a good mental place, and that's absolutely fine, but it's not going to make the Reiki vibration be more efficient when it comes out of your hands. Um, it is possible to do healing without being formally trained or taking a class. Neither Karen nor I, in all of our travels, have ever met anybody who could do Reiki specifically without the formal training. Doesn't mean you can't do healing. There are many healing vibrations out in the world, but the very specific Reiki vibration needs the the energy anatomy changed in order to unkink something in the energy anatomy in order to be able to channel the Reiki vibration. So keep that in mind. That's also something that needs to be done in person. That is not something that can be done at a distance or online. There are just some things that need to be done when you actually have your hands in somebody's energy anatomy. It's a little bit like getting you hydrated. To get you hydrated, I have to have you, the water, and your body in the same place. In that instance, I don't need to be there. But for the Reiki attunement, you do need to all be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, and that's commonly called an attunement class. So you go and you meet in person with a Reiki teacher, sometimes called a Reiki master, and they will work with you to adjust your energy system. It's usually done as a kind of ceremony, that the teacher then works with each individual student. And for that reason, I think small classes are also best. I have heard of people doing attunements in massive big classes, and I think there is something that's likely to get missed or diluted doing a Reiki class in that way. So find yourself a teacher who really values the importance of a small in-person class. I mean, there's loads of stuff about the theory of Reiki, if you like, and even coming together in community that can happen online, but the actual learning of it to be able to have that access that particular vibration of energy and have that running through your body so that you can make it available to someone else's body or your body. If you're doing self-healing with Reiki specifically, then you do need to meet with somebody in person.
Yeah. And Karen mentioned earlier that to do Reiki, you don't need a specific brainwave. I wanted to revisit that because it's absolutely wonderful that it doesn't need a brainwave. That means, unlike meditation, right? Meditation, by its very definition, is trying to hit a specific brainwave in the mind that then has this effect on the rest of the system. The fact that Reiki doesn't require a brainwave, all it requires is a cupped hand, means that you don't have to set aside time to do it the way that you have to set aside time to do meditation. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that, because the last thing I need is to be putting something else on my to-do list for the day. It means that I can do Reiki while I'm watching television. I can do it while I'm standing in line, while I'm talking on the phone. As I said, it doesn't need two hands. You can do it one-handed or the other. As Karen mentioned, does that mean that I will have as much of an enriched experience? Absolutely not. If I'm sitting there watching television with my cupped hand on my belly, I'm absolutely not going to feel the luxuriously wonderful yumminess that Reiki can be when I'm paying attention to it, but it's not any less effective. It's making y'all just as less irritating. It's making me just as not tired at the end of my day as doing it when I'm paying attention. I'm just not having a subjective experience of it as much as I am if I'm paying attention to it. But I'm very grateful for that because frankly, I just wouldn't do it as often. If I had to put aside every day, I don't meditate every day. I can't meditate every day. I do it as often as I can. So I'm grateful that I don't have to do that with Reiki.
Yeah, and I think for me the only bit that the main bit that varies a bit is the level of relaxation that I can get to. Because I
Mhm.
think there are other things which support us being as relaxed as possible. So for example, for most of us, we will be more relaxed when we close our eyes or when our body can be
Yes.
completely in a
Yes.
restful position. We don't have to sit up or stand up or in a quiet environment or with some lovely relaxing music or whatever, or somewhere where we're either on our own or only around someone we feel really comfortable with. So all those things will add to our experience of being, and probably the depth of relaxation we're able to get to. But I think whatever situation you're in when you do some Reiki, I sometimes talk about it as like a dial. It's like if there's a dial of how relaxed are you, however relaxed you aren't, Reiki will Reiki will tend to improve on that. So it might not take you all the way to I'm 100% relaxed, but it will almost certainly in any situation, including in the queue at the supermarket, or if you were sitting in the emergency room in a hospital, that's a stressful place to be. You're probably not going to be really amazingly relaxed in that situation ever, and you will almost certainly be able to be more relaxed than you would have been otherwise if you can at least sit there doing some Reiki on yourself.
Yes,
So I
absolutely.
think that's a really valuable thing about it. Um, I wonder if there's just a couple of other things that it might be worth mentioning now that can be misconceptions. Because Tiffany, Reiki is often talked about as a Japanese method of healing, and the word itself is comes from the Japanese language, meaning kind of universal life energy. But the as we've taught, hopefully it's clear from what we've talked about that the vibration of energy that we call Reiki is universal to the planet, to our Earth. And in that sense, it's not a Japanese system of healing. The man who is largely credited with developing the system of healing around that vibration of energy happened to be a Japanese man, but it could, and and we're all very grateful to him, Master Mikao Usui, who
Woohoo!
was he has helped to. I just got shivers when you did that. Who we largely credit the healing system as we use it today, and the way we're able to do attunements and teach people and all of that.
And it's
He
very Japanese because he was Japanese. That whole system is
Yeah,
Japanese.
but equally the energy, he could have been French or Indian or wherever. He could have been anything. And personally, I mean, I never got to speak to him, but I believe that he would really have wanted it to be seen as an energy that's and a healing system that's accessible to everybody. And it's not that if it was Japanese, that's necessarily negative. But I think when we associate things as coming from a particular place, that for some people that would really draw them. They'd get really excited about that. For other people, they might think, no, I don't know if that's for me, because that doesn't really fit with what I happen to be interested in. And it doesn't really matter. So to talk about it as a Japanese system of healing, I think in a way is a little bit misleading. The person who originally helped us to find a way to make use of this energy as we do today was Japanese, but that doesn't make the energy Japanese. I think that's a helpful distinction.
Absolutely. And equally in the same vein is that you don't need a belief. You don't need to believe in anything in order to learn it and benefit from it. And I think that's crucial because it's unfortunate that so many people have chosen to turn understanding and using Reiki into a spiritual practice for not so much that they themselves, it's unfortunate because I think if anybody uses anything to increase their spirituality, that's a wonderful thing, but it's not something that has to happen. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter that you believe anything. It doesn't matter that you have a belief as you come into it, or if you don't want any belief whatsoever, any more than drinking water is going to help you. Right. So it's something that lends itself to be used because it will help you feel better and it can fit into your life and it should fit into the life that you have at the moment. It doesn't need anything extra for you to believe in or subscribe to or have to incorporate.
Yeah, and I think that's a real strength of it because, I think we've both attuned people from all kinds of backgrounds, culturally, different spiritual, religious, areas. And Reiki is a really useful energy medicine technique, which I think can be of great value to any of us. And we we shouldn't worry too much about do I need to be a spiritual person. I think that can be a bit alienating for some people. And the other thing I think we should probably wrap this up because you and I could talk about Reiki for days.
And do.
Yeah. The other really important thing that maybe we could just leave people with that we haven't mentioned, I don't think yet, is that you don't need any special healing skills or abilities? That's a really common question I think we get asked. Oh, well,
Hmm.
could I learn Reiki? Would I don't feel, I don't see myself as a healer. Now, not everybody is going to want to set up a Reiki practice. That's okay. Reiki really is at its heart a self-care practice. And I think, pretty much anyone who can sit in a room for a few hours and pay reasonable attention and put at least one hand somewhere near their body in a vaguely cupped position can learn Reiki. And it really is very accessible in that way. You don't need any special skills or magic powers or anything like that.
Yeah, and you can learn it in a day.
Yeah.
Just takes one day. You can learn it in a day.
Yeah.
Okay, before we truly, absolutely, very much wrap up, a bit of a plug. So I wrote a book called Reiki Helps You Feel Better. That's for
Yay!
kids. Yay! But I very specifically wrote it for my adult. I wrote it for children, but it's also, so get it for your kids. But I also wrote it for adults that don't want all the details. They just want the bullet points, but they wanted all the information without having to get into a whole big book about it. So look out for that. But also China Honey has written a book called Understanding Reiki. She's wonderful. She's fabulous. The book is fabulous. That book does have all the details. If you want to get into the ins and the outs, it's actually the book that stands as our textbook for our level 1 curriculum. So we'll leave links in the links in the thing for the episode.
Show notes.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, everybody. We hope that helps. Send us in your questions and we'll get into the weeds. As you can see, we could talk about this forever.
Bye, everybody. It was great to have you listen to us today.
Take care.
Hi, I'm Carol Smith, the producer of the Life Made Easier podcast. We hope today's episode gave you some meaningful tools and takeaways to help make your life feel a little lighter. You've reached the end of this episode, but not the end of the ways that you can support us. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, follow us on social media, and check out our Patreon for extra content and ways you can go deeper with us. There's also a whole library of episodes waiting for you to help increase your energy intelligence. Take care, and we'll see you on the next Life Made Easier.